religious home, but very blessed home. And I, until then, had never met an Indian who was Christian. And I thought it was the most bizarre concept. Jesus to me was always the white man's God. And, when you see a picture of Jesus, he looks like a Western white man. And so I never attributed Jesus to being, someone that an Indian following back from India. And I say, hey, Jesus, if you're a God, great. I will add you to my list. I believe in a million different gods. I will add you to my list. That's okay. I can do that. However, if you're the one and only true God of this world, I need you to prove it to me. That there's something more out there, because that's why you're searching. Right? We are all created to know that God exists. And it's an attraction. It's, the God is calling you home.
Hello, friends. We're going to have a chat with Sweta, get to know more about her story. Join me in this conversation. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your childhood years.
Well, thank you for having me. So I was born and raised in Gujarat and into a very amazing home. I was very blessed to have been born into that house. My parents, my grandfather, and even, before my grandfather, we grew up in a very fairly strict Hindu home. Especially my grandfather was very known in our community, and even like within the sect of religion that they follow, they were very known, and to the point where the best example, the best way to say is like they have a pope almost, like a head of the religion, and he would come and frequently visit my grandfather in our home. So grew up in a very, very religious home. And that kind of, continued on to here when my family and I immigrated here. My dad immigrated first, and then we came a few years later. Mm-hmm. But even when we immigrated to the States, still grew up in a very religious home, practiced Hinduism. We went to Mandir every Saturday, and even I grew up very involved in the Mandir growing up because, my dad, even to this day, is still one of the very, he's almost like one of the founding people of the Mandir in Chicago. So we grew up in a very religious home, but very blessed home. I felt just nothing but love and everything in that home. So I'm very blessed to have been born into the home.
Yeah. So talk to us about your high school and college years. How was that like?
High school and college were definitely very rough patches of my life. They were good, right? But as anyone in college, I did a little bit of rebelling and did a little bit of the prodigal son where, high school I was pretty good, but I started rebelling a little bit in high school, kind of continued that into college. And by the grace of God, I graduated college. But, they were great years. However, they were years of my life that definitely shaped the rest of me, and they were the most impactful years of my life because of the things that happened and the circumstances, and also the choices that I decided to make in those years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. So, what prompted you to explore or take a closer look at Christianity or Jesus?
When I first got to college, I met my first South Indian Christian, or I'll just say Indian Christian. I met my first Indian Christian, and I remember her telling me she's Christian, and I was like, what do you mean? I don't, like, you're Indian, but you're Indian and you're Christian? She's like, yes, I'm Indian and I'm Christian. I was like, so did you convert? Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. And so she had to explain to me that they were generational Christians. And I, until then, had never met an Indian who was Christian. And I thought it was the most bizarre concept because I had grown up with Hindus and Muslims. All of my friends in high school were, if they were Indian, they were either Hindu, or if they're Pakistani or Indian, they were Muslim. And so it took me a little bit like, you're Hindu, but no, you're not Hindu. She's like, no, I'm not Hindu, I'm Christian. I was like, but did you just recently become a Christian? She's like, no. And so, so that's when I really started meeting Indian Christians. And when I started meeting Indian Christians, that's when, I got close to someone and they would always ask me questions about Hinduism. And I was like, well, I was born and raised Hindu. I'm like, I know everything because I even took my little puja kit to college. So I was still practicing when I was in college. I would like clean off the floor, do my puja before going off to classes and stuff. And they would ask me questions, I would answer. Then they would ask me some more questions, and but then they would say, "But you answered something different a few weeks ago. Doesn't that contradict what you just told me now?" And that's when I started seeing the cracks, and that's when I started seeing, "Hey, what am I believing in?" Because that person's right. I It does contradict. And at that point, it had gotten to a point where, hey, don't discuss religion with Swetha because it was a very touchy topic. Because that's when I could no longer answer the questions about the faith that I had grown up practicing and was still believing in. It really made me question what it is that I was following.
So you were pondering with some important questions. And so as you were wrestling with these questions, did your opinion change about Jesus?
Jesus to me was always the white man's God, right? Because 80 something percent of India is Hindu. And even, when you see a picture of Jesus, he looks like a Western white man. And so I never attributed Jesus to being, someone that an Indian follows. Because in my mind, in the stereotypes and the biases that I had grown up with was that he was a white man's religion. And he was not, what we follow. I mean, Buddhism was, came off of Hinduism. Islam, I knew enough about Islam where, it's just, Islam was Islam. But I had never really given Jesus a thought before that.
Interesting. So what prompted you to explore and take a closer look at your own faith and beliefs?
When I could no longer answer my questions that people were asking me, that's when it was like, I need to know what I believe in. Because I was going to my dad and asking him questions. I was reading as much as I could to find these answers. I couldn't talk to the priest directly, so I would have my dad or mail someone ask the priest the questions. But those answers were just not, they weren't enough. So I remember I had just come out of my psychology final and didn't do well. And so I remember calling my dad and saying, book me a ticket to India. Because at that point, everything I had stopped doing puja by that point. Because I didn't know what it was that I kept believing in. And so I booked a ticket, went to India for 2 months. I would go to these temples, right? Because in India, there's temples, like two temples per block. And so there was a fairly large temple right outside of where we lived in India. And so I would go to these temples every day, stand in front of these idols and say, hey, if you're God, I need to know. I need you to show me that you're God. Because right now I'm not believing it. Came back 2 months later, more confused and more lost than even before. And, I had to know what it was that I believed in, because if people were asking me, hey, why do you believe this? I had to be able to justify it, and I couldn't. And that's when I really started looking into what was it that I was believing in. I understand that that's what my parents taught me, but can I explain that to someone?
So now you're starting to wrestle with all these questions. So what were your first impressions about Jesus and Christianity?
The first time I actually even talked about Jesus was when I came back and I was talking to my friend, and I was talking to them, and I'm sitting there, and then out of nowhere I start saying the gospel and didn't even realize I was saying the gospel. And I remember saying, yeah, I realized that I'm always going to be a sinner. Like, I'm never going to be able to atone for my own sins because I'm perpetually going to just keep sinning. I can live a perfect life as much as I want, but I will continue to sin. And I can live a perfect life, and the last day I do something and I sin, then does everything get wiped away? Because Hinduism is so much about a works-based religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to work yourself, and you have to get these quote unquote best way to explain brownie points to
Mm-hmm.
be able to get into heaven. And so I'm sitting there talking to my friend, and I was like, I realized, yeah, I understand why Jesus had to die on the cross. And as these words are coming out of my mouth, I couldn't understand why I was saying these words,
Mm-hmm.
but they felt right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time where I was like, I believe what I'm saying. I just don't know why I'm saying it. Because I essentially ended up speaking the whole gospel out and didn't even realize that that's what I was saying.
Yeah. Yeah. None of us are perfect, and if it's hard for us to carry that burden on our shoulders. So, what prompted you to surrender your life to Jesus?
I didn't want to initially,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this was a big step. I was um, I was going to go against my parents. I was going to go against my entire family, and the stature that they hold, and face criticism and everything. So I remember the first time I sat down in my bed after coming back from India, and I said, "Hey Jesus, if you're a God, great. I will add you to my list. I
Mm-hmm.
believe in a million different gods. I will add you to my list. That's okay. I can do that. However, if you're the one and only true God of this world, I need you to prove it to me." And at that point, I didn't know the verse, "Thou shalt not test the Lord your God." But I decided to test him and see. And by that point, probably, I mean, my parents were amazing and they continue to be amazing. But as I rebelled in high school and college, that really put a strain on the relationship my dad and I had. And it was one of the most important things to me in my life. But every day we fought. Every single day we would fight. And so the next morning after I prayed that, my dad and I started bonding. And I was like, waiting for the fight, waiting for the fight, waiting, no fight. Second day comes around, waiting for the fight, no fight. Third day, no fight. And I sit down back in my bed on the third day. And I remember sitting in my bed and saying, all right, Mike, you proved yourself to me. Because I never asked Jesus to fix the relationship between me and my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I just said, prove yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's deep down inside, that's what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment I said, all right, I'm like, I guess you are the one and only true God of this world, immediately I felt a presence in the room. And I got so scared,
Mm-hmm.
so scared. So I opened my eyes. I looked in the bathroom, looked in the tub, looked in the closet, looked under my bed. I had an armoire. I opened up the armoire, looked to see if someone was in there
Mm-hmm.
because I could feel
Mm-hmm.
something or someone in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat back down and closed my eyes again and immediately felt that. And I felt these giant hands come and just hold me. And from that day on, I was like, I have never looked back because years of practicing Hinduism and years of doing these fasts and years of doing all of these meditations to be able to achieve that presence of God. And I got it the moment that I told Jesus that I believe that he's the one and only God. I knew at that point that I found it. Like I found him. Like I found the one and only God of this world because what I had been following was just not there.
Yeah. It's an amazing story. So, if you have to summarize your journey in like one sentence, how would you do that and why?
I went from feeling worthless to loved because even to this day, 20 years after I got saved, I can still feel what I would feel standing in front of those idols.
Mm.
And I remember very vividly, I can close my eyes and I can imagine almost like, where my life is being filmed on camera, where I can see myself standing for these idols and praying and not like feeling condemnation and feeling like I was not worthy enough to stand there.
Mm.
And here came this God that I never knew anything about. And the moment that I uttered his name from my lips,
Mm.
I felt the love that I had been seeking
Mm.
my entire life in a moment. And I had to do nothing. I did nothing to earn that love. And you know, it's a feeling that so many of us search.
Mhm. So from feeling worthless to being wanted by the creator of the universe. So now you already said that you have been a follower of Christ for 20 years. So how was that journey?
It's been rough because I had to break it to my parents that I no longer believe in the religion that they had me grow up in. I married a Christian man, which was like another thing that was tough because for them they wanted me to marry a Hindu guy and have a Hindu wedding. However,
Mhm.
through it all, I would go back and do it over and over and over again because as rough as it's been the most amazing 20 years of my life.
Mhm.
I have never felt so fulfilled.
Mhm.
I have never felt so wanted,
Mhm.
complete, and whole. And, I tell my kids, success comes to those who fail.
Mhm.
And so, and failure comes when you take risk and when you take chances. And it's the same thing. You, if you know something is out there and you want it to be the truth and you want to follow the truth, then you have to be bold and step out in faith. And when you do, that's when you're going to find what you're looking for. Had I stayed within my four walls, I would still be crying and worthless.
So talk to me about what is the biggest change that you have noticed?
Um, when, most of my family, not most of everyone,
Mhm.
except for me, is still Hindu.
Okay.
And, a lot of my friends growing up they're all Hindu. And one of the biggest things that I have seen as now an outsider who used to be an insider is the way we mourn
Mhm.
when someone passes. Um, I have gone to a lot of Hindu funerals, and the mourning there breaks my heart because there is wailing and crying, not only because of the loss of life, but there's days of rituals that follow afterwards to make sure that this person gets to heaven.
Mm.
Right? There's so many things that you have to do on day 1, 2, 3. And when I go to a Christian funeral, there is there's mourning for the loss of life, but there's assurance as to where that person is.
Mhm.
As a Hindu, would I have been able to say that if I close my eyes, I'm going to open them and will be in heaven? No. However, as a Christian, I know that when I close my eyes here on earth, I am going to open them and be in heaven. And that assurance is something that I see that Hindu people don't have, is that we can try to live a good life and hope that we've done enough to make it. As a Christian, I know that my faith and my trust in the fact that Jesus died for me on the cross for my sins, because I can never do enough to say, hey, I did enough. Can I get into heaven? No, because I will always be a sinner. By nature, we're sinners.
Mhm.
And I know that I have that assurance in Christ that when I die, I am going to heaven. And it breaks my heart to see people mourn not knowing where that person, where that soul went. And I've had so many friends say that to me, that I've lost, my husband or my brother or whoever it is, and I don't know where they're gone. And but I have never had a friend who's Christian say that, because we sing songs even at funerals that talks about to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
It is so true, isn't it, that we have a living hope, and that hope is found in this person, this creator, Jesus Christ. And so, one final question. What would you like to share with someone who's on a spiritual journey and wants to know more about Jesus?
I will say to them, it's scary,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's scary to leave something that you've known your whole life because this is what you grew up in, this is what you're comfortable in, but you know that there's something more out there because that's why you're searching, right? We are all created to know that God exists, and it's an attraction. It's, the God is calling you home. And as scary as it is to think, what could possibly happen if I take this road that I don't know where it's leading me to? Are you willing to take the chance and take the road that you do know where it's going to lead you to? Because as a Hindu, I was following a road hoping that's the road to heaven. And I stopped hoping when I knew that the road that I'm on right now, I know there's no hope. I know that this road is taking me to heaven. It is scary to step out into the unknown, but there's so much joy and so much peace and so much assurance, and you are going to feel a love that will overwhelm you, because I cry sometimes just to think about how much God loves me. Yeah. So it's scary, but good things come when you take chances and risks.
Yeah. Thank you, Sweta, for sharing your amazing story. And this is a God story, from feeling worthless to feeling wanted by the creator of the universe, Yeshua. Friends, check out more stories at yeshusamaj.org. Thank you.